Deloise Pampometer. I'm from the sovereign Mi'kmaq Nation on unceded Mi'kmaqi territory, which is most of the East Coast. My First Nation is Eel River Bar First Nation, but it's just one of many First Nations that make up the giant Mi'kmaq Nation. I'm also a lawyer. I've been practicing for 20 years now, and I am a professor and chair in Indigenous governance at Ryerson University. At Ryerson University, I'm a tenured full prof. I'm the first Native full prof that they've ever had at Ryerson, and I'm also the chair in Indigenous governance, which is a research chair. My particular focus is on First Nations, so I focus exclusively on researching, publishing, teaching. We try to stay away from being pan-Aboriginal because we're very, very distinct. Even amongst First Nations, we're distinct, so mine tends to focus primarily on First Nations. Everything I do is commingled. I basically work on advocating for Indigenous rights, Aboriginal rights, treaty rights, that kind of thing. And really at the core, it's social justice for Native people. I've done that in a variety of ways. On the legal side of things, it's legal research and publications and trying to hold the government to account on things like legislation and policy that they have, or going to the United Nations and testifying on how Canada's violating our rights. But when you isolate the conditions of Indigenous peoples in Canada, then the UN Human Development Index for Canada drops from the top 10. Any spare time I have is volunteering or offering services for free for First Nations. So I grew up in Mi'kmaqi in my home territory, but at the time, I wasn't registered under the Indian Act because of sex discrimination in the Indian Act, and so we weren't allowed to live on reserve, so we just lived right off the reserve. So half my family was on, half my family was off, and when I was about 6, I think, my father moved us to Fredericton, New Brunswick, because he wanted us to have an education. And where my reserve is at the very tip of New Brunswick, it's very small, it's economically depressed, the schools weren't very good, so he wanted me to have an education. My dad was quite a bit older. Like, he was from a much older generation. So the worst kind of generation in terms of how Native people were treated. They were taught to be ashamed of themselves, don't speak their language, horribly abused and mistreated. So the fact that my dad at all had any sense of resistance or resilience in him always amazed me. So for me, our relationship was, he was always just giving me books. He wanted me to be a critical thinker, to challenge the common notions that were out there. But he said, if you grow up and you be a counter-scientist, then you'll be able to disprove and prove our stuff at the same time. So I didn't grow up to be a scientist, but I figured law could do the very same thing. Well, I was just brought up in politics without realizing that what we were engaged in was politics. In terms of law, it was really, I think, more my brothers and sisters pushing me because they didn't have a university education, and they felt like, well, at least some of us need to go on and some of us need to get these tools. We're all not going to get it. We all have different skills, so we think you should do it. And I thought, I don't want to go to law school because I felt like I need to be on the front lines. And they said, listen, all of these issues are going to be here when you're done law school and when you're done all of your other school, and when you're 80 years old, these issues are going to be here. But I ended up doing it, and I'm so glad I did it. My brothers and sisters were just old enough to be radically involved in Indigenous resistance and asserting our rights and all of that stuff. They made me, forced against my will when I was little, be a part of all of this stuff. You know, there's some crazy things they used to make me do. I think I was like 18, and they made me go do negotiations with the federal government on fisheries agreements. And I was like, first of all, I don't know the first thing about negotiations. And second of all, like, who am I? And sure enough, that was always the comment from the other side of the table, you know, justice lawyers and government people. Who are you? Like, what do you have to say? You're nothing. And they said, well, you don't deserve to be here because you have no experience, or you don't deserve to be here because you're a woman, or you're not a lawyer. So I went and became a lawyer. Well, you're a lawyer, but you're not an expert. Okay, so I went and got my master's in Native law, so I would be an expert. It still wasn't enough. And you know, and I get my doctorate, and it's still not enough. So I came to realize it's never gonna be enough if enough is determined by the other side of the equation. We're good. We had this with or without university degrees. When I was younger, I was horribly shy. Horribly. I couldn't look at anybody in the eye. I couldn't talk to anybody. Even though I was going to all these meetings and protests and all that stuff, I couldn't engage. And when I went to law school, I just knew every class I was going to have to public speak, and it was horrible. I literally had to force myself to do it. My brothers and sisters said, you know, that's how you become a warrior, when you do the things that scare you. I was so lucky to have two beautiful boys. You know, I had both of them when I was in my undergrad, and in fact, you know, I loved them and welcomed them into my life. I fully embraced motherhood and everything that went along with it, acknowledging at the same time that there's a lot of challenges when you're a mom. And I didn't realize that I would be getting divorced. As soon as I had my second one, oh, divorce, what? What's happening now? Now I'm a single mom. This is terrible. I'm never gonna be able to do this. How am I gonna raise my kids and go to law school? So I entered law school as a single mom, which was very, very intimidating. I'm so much happier, stronger, wiser because of my kids and what they contributed even to my education. Even though there's challenges, they just, they're never insurmountable. Being an Indigenous person in law and politics, you have to be prepared for a lot of pushback. Not only do we have to, in law and politics as Native people, navigate the obstacle course of violence and racism and all the dangers that are out there, especially for Native women. But if you get through that, then there's all of the dangers in the politics themselves about them trying to discredit you or exclude you, keep you out of things. So if you can if you can manage to get over all of those hurdles, then they don't have anything behind that. When you're a little kid and people talk about success, you hear from your parents or society, success is graduate from high school, get married and have kids and make lots of money, buy a house and cars and vacations and all stuff. And over time, I've found that success means something very, very different for me. A definition of success is when every Native person talks about and makes at least part of their lives about advocating for Native people. Because we don't all get to learn about this. Like, my brothers and sisters didn't teach me everything I needed to know about the treaties. I learned that in university because they didn't have that background. So what they could teach me was resistance and resilience and what it means to be a warrior and advocate for your people and always put your nation first. And that traditional knowledge or education grounded me in all the other education I got. So we have to look beyond all of the internal struggles that we have with one another and say, the bigger battle is being here at the end of the day and protecting our nations and our lands and waters, and success is us doing that. I think the biggest challenge that I've ever faced was always on the inside, that I wasn't smart enough or, educated enough or knew enough, or that I would ever be enough. When I was growing up, I didn't see Native people anywhere in anything. I certainly didn't see them in school. I didn't see them in my undergrad at university. I didn't see them as like super media stars. So when you don't see yourself anywhere, you think, well, I must not be good enough. And that was the biggest thing to to overcome. And I just wish now that I could go back to my younger self and say, oh, none of all of that matters. All of that is noise.
My name is Lyle Thompson. My Ongohoan name is Dehasanunde. I am Onondaga Hawk Clan. I play professional lacrosse for the Georgia Swarm and the Chesapeake Bayhawks. Right from when I was a kid, I dreamed of playing professional lacrosse. They say the harder you play, the stronger the medicine. I started playing organized lacrosse when I was 6 years old, which is actually kind of late for where I come from. Got to high school, it's sort of what kept me in school and pushing me to get good grades so that I could continue to play. In a way, it was a vehicle for me to get an education. None of my grandparents ever went to college. My parents never went to college. My brothers and myself were the first ones to sort of take that step. My father sort of made it a goal for us. He said, if we want to be professional lacrosse players, we're going to be educated professional lacrosse players. Once I finished college, me and my brothers sort of made a pretty good names for ourselves, became Nike athletes and professional lacrosse players. Jeremy, he was who I looked up to. He was who I wanted to be like him, I wanted to run like him, play like him.
My name's Jeremy Thompson. My traditional given name is Gayakwa, which means the sun is leaning. I am currently playing in the National Lacrosse League. I'm the eldest brother of the four. Lyle's the youngest. Us as a family, we've always carried this game of lacrosse. It was much more than a sport to us. It was, it was about culture. It was about those traditions that were passed down from our elders and our community members.
I grew up on the Onondaga Nation. It's a native community just south of Syracuse, New York, central New York. Lacrosse there is rich. I didn't grow up with a lot of money. We didn't have electricity or running water until I was 10 years old. I kept myself occupied with sports, being outside, because being inside, there was nothing there. I didn't have a television. We used lanterns to light our house. It was a lot of work to just keep the family going, keep our house warm. I consider myself really fortunate for the situation I was put in because it brought me to where I am right now. I was on a good road. It was a good path because of lacrosse. Lacrosse really kept me in line. It was easy to stay away from the drugs and alcohol because I witnessed my oldest brother Jeremy, go through a lot of that stuff.
As an older brother, for him, I can honestly say all three of my younger brothers haven't touched a sip or touched the drug of alcohol or touched drugs. And to me, that says something that holds power and understanding and strength, really. Because, now I'm currently, 8 years sober from drugs and alcohol. And, I'm proud to say that for him.
I had my first daughter when I was a freshman in college. It was a huge shift for me. There were times I felt like I had to choose one or the other. I either had to, take it easy on the schooling part, take it easy on the workout part, or the lacrosse part, or the family part. It was a huge balance for me. And there were times I felt like I needed to give one up so that I could give more time to the other. I'm still balancing those things. The only thing that changed is work replaced school. I've always been an optimist, and I always knew things were going to work out. If lacrosse didn't work out, I still had my family. I live here in Six Nations, and this is where my wife's from. We have 5 kids, 4 girls and a boy. Being a dad is a lot of work at times, but it's also just really fun. And it's a lot of learning. It's a lot of learning about yourself and being a parent. I say I have 3 fathers. Those 3 fathers were the people who helped me grow as a human. The first person is my father. He sort of laid the foundation. Taught me how to be respectful and how to be passionate and competitive and everything that I was through college and that got me there. My coach, Coach Scott Marr, means a lot when someone is like, hey, you mean a lot to me. When I was 19, 20 years old, from someone who was 40 to 50 years old that's supposed to be coaching me. And he allowed me to build a friendship with him, but also learn a lot from him. I guess my last person is my brother Miles. He was just that hype beast. You know what I mean? He was right there by my side, telling me I could do it, giving me confidence. Thompson Brothers Lacrosse started when I was a junior in college. In the summers, we would run lacrosse camps because a lot of these communities would request us, me and my brothers. Now we're a partner of Nike's. We sell apparel. We do a partnership with them for cleats. We run lacrosse camps around the country and speaking events. To me, why it's so important to work with kids so that they don't have to go through, in general, any struggles. If they develop that positive attitude, that right mindset, that respect, and have fun. If you're not having fun, I don't see the purpose in it. Biggest lesson I learned throughout my career is how to lose. After losing, and I'm sure any athlete can sort of relate to this, you hang on to it. You're attached to winning. You're so attached to this feeling of winning that you feel better than someone else. I still consider myself competitive, and I compete with myself nowadays more than I do with my opponents. After my wins, I feel good, I feel happy, I feel fortunate, but after my losses, I feel the same way. If you're able to be happy consistently throughout your days and allow that to go years and months, and carry on, that is success to me. I think it's overcoming our traumas, overcoming everything that's happened to us throughout history, and it's going from these traumas that you might see as people that are hurt to people that are still hurt, but now they know they're hurt. And then people who are no longer hurt, just happy and able to pass that, what they've learned, down. I sort of just believe in a domino effect in a good way, that I do the right things and that impacts people in such a way that allows them to impact more people and impact the next generation and the next. I define resilience as just overcoming the obstacles that are in front of you, but also being strong, being proud. What I'd want to say if I had the opportunity to speak in front of all the Indigenous people on Earth, it's letting kids know what we've gone through as people. It's letting them know that they're gonna face some of these things throughout their life. Like I said, showing them that we do practice our tradition and that is healthy. You can take that route strictly if you want, but there's another route too, and that is to live in this modern world that we live in. Or you can balance the two, which is, I feel like it's my route. It's the situation I've been given. You're able to do that, and you're gonna help a lot of people by doing that because of sharing the history, sharing what has happened to our people, and allowing them to see it for themselves and continue to learn about themselves, their culture. It's hard not to see it, how resilient we are as people because of what we've gone through. 80% of the world doesn't even know what we've gone through, doesn't even know what happened. That's the shocking part to me, but yet we're still able to say, yes, it did happen. We do want you to know about it, but first we're gonna learn from it. We're gonna get past it. with all the efforts that have been put in place to try to make us not be here, we're still here, and I think that's the only thing you got to see to say, you know, they're resilient.
I'm Jen Harper, the founder and CEO of Cheekbone Beauty Cosmetics, Inc., and we are a digitally native, direct-to-consumer brand that helps Indigenous youth see themselves in a beauty brand. So we're located right here in St. Catharines, Ontario. Our headquarters is my house, and we're sitting right here in my home office. And so our whole concept is basically feel good, do good, and look good. The reason why we exist, I always break it down just to this one statement, that we exist to enhance and empower the lives of Indigenous youth. And we do that using lipstick as a platform to talk about social injustices that still exist to this day, especially for our youth. Schools on reservation get much less funding than schools off reservation. And as a mom and as once a student, if we're not fostering a love for learning, and this is affecting Indigenous youth right now at this very moment, that their schools are not up to country standards, it's not fair. So the First Nation Child and Family Caring Society is the organization that we give 10% of all of our profits to.
I'm so proud that she's come from essentially a small, tiny one-person, and still kind of a one-person operation, but to what it is now, where there's so many people involved with the company, there's so much going on with the company, there's so much exposure for the company, and with the more exposure that she has, the better she can do for Indigenous people and for the education of Indigenous people. So I'm super proud of what she's done.
We currently use plastic, and over the last 2 years, we've been in development or in researching and figuring out ways how we can do that part and be more socially conscious when it comes to environmental issues. We realize that we're trying to make this big impact on Indigenous youth, and doing so, though, how do we make less of an impact on the planet? So I grew up right here in the Niagara region. I was born in Thunder Bay, lived in Toronto for 2 years, and then at about 4.5, 5 years old, moved to St. Catharines with my mom and have lived here ever since. It was a very white community with a mom, a dad, and it's kind of that, I guess, the thing we saw on TV growing up of like picket fence, and those are when my like troubled youth years, I guess, start, when you realize that your family isn't like all the other families that you go to school with. My mom is not Indigenous, so I grew up with her, and the only, I guess, experience with culture would be the times that I would go visit my dad and would visit Native centers with him in Toronto. I know he would take me out into the land. As a teen, the deep reasons why my father didn't do things a certain way, or knowing that he had struggles with alcohol and I couldn't understand that or understand that why. And then on my mom's side of the family, there was family issues that she was dealing with. So there was always a lot of dysfunction. I guess I kept that a lot of secrets because of that, and because of feeling shame because of both of those reasons. So never really talking to anybody about those feelings. And then feeling the abandonment. My dad, when I was 14, decided to move back to our family's First Nation, and that is, I think it's like 16 hours, if not further away from here in Niagara. So that ended the visits that I did have with him up until that point. Cheekbone Beauty only exists because of my sobriety. So prior to this dream I had about it in January 2015, I got sober in November of 2014, and then a few months later had this dream, and then realized these last 4 years of doing this, 5 years, that it's been part of my healing. So without me deciding to get well and then doing all the work to heal, which cheekbone has been a complete part of that. So again, losing that relationship with my father as a young child and seeing him again at 19 and ending our relationship at that point because of his alcoholism, I just decided I didn't want to have anything to do with him. You know, after years of therapy, that was more damaging to me as opposed to try to understand why he was like that. When anyone has something like a struggle with alcohol, drugs, food, sex, shopping, that is just a byproduct of something that's much deeper within them. So the impact that essentially colonization had on First Nations, Indigenous people, I had no idea what that meant or what that was. So learning that throughout the process of building Cheekbone Beauty, reconnecting with my culture and people from my culture and communities across North America has helped me heal. The emails, direct messages I get from a lot of our customers of how it makes them feel. So to see our brand exist, to get our products, when we talk about the shopping experience, I guess, as a whole, and the order shows up and it comes in this beautiful packaging and they get to unwrap it like a gift. And then they're pulling out our pink feather, which we have sent since day one with every order. As people, unless we are healthy and whole, and I describe it in that circle like this 4 quadrant of spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and physically healthy. Unless we are whole, we can't go out and do these great things. And for me, I see now how much my alcoholism was blocking essentially my greatness to go do good things in the world. I think it took me so long to get well because shame can destroy us, and that's why I'm so open about it now. I am so not ashamed. I always say I'm the proudest recovered alcoholic that exists because I believe talking about it is what has helped me heal.
I think the fact that she's turned that around and bounced back from that and really embraced it is definitely one of the most resilient parts of her.
As an Indigenous woman struggling with alcohol, the last thing I wanted for the world to see was another Native person who has an alcohol problem. Like, I just didn't want to be that stereotype. And it was because of shame, and that's nothing to be ashamed of when I learned the truth. I learned the truth that this has to do with generational trauma, that this is something that's gone on within our families for generations, and that we have to end it. Being a part of changing that narrative or creating a new story is something that I'm really proud of. Just before launching, like having done this like 18 months of research and development, in 2016, in September, I was going to launch then, and then my brother took his own life. That obviously is a huge thing that you're like, you want to give up. Except I'm like, I couldn't after that happened. He left behind 3 amazing kids, nieces, nephews, cousins, family. You know, when you struggle through something like this, or when your family has to go through that, we all want to find, I guess, this meaning in it, right? And BJ had said something to me. I talked to him about building this company, and one of the last conversations we had was, he said, Jen, our youth need hope and they need help. And he's like, I've never heard of anyone ever trying to make a company that's going to do something to try to help them. And he said, I think it's going to be great. And him saying that is like sometimes the thing when I'm struggling that helps me get through and on to the next project. I rely heavily on my spirituality to help me function and get through things. And then I also surround myself with incredible people. I have an incredible family that is so supportive in everything that I do. And I know I'm so blessed for all of their help. I've always looked at success in these last 5 years as how happy I am, how much joy do I get to feel every day. So happiness, contentment, and joy are the meaning of true success in my mind. have said this to many audiences, and I firmly believe it. Like, we aren't supposed to be here. We aren't supposed to exist. They wanted us to assimilate into a colonial culture, but we are still here, practicing our culture, learning our languages, relearning our languages. They still exist. Come on, like, Indigenous people are probably the most resilient people on the planet. If a child that grows up knowing that they are loved, they are then capable of showing so much more love on to those next generation, the next generation, and the next generation after that. I say, like, these Indigenous kids don't even know how much I love them, right? Like, they don't, and the people were looking at me like, you're weird, like, kind of like I'm a weirdo, right? And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I'm gonna let them, they can think that, but that is really why I'm doing it. It's like this love that you want them to feel. I don't know you, but I love you.